You're watching Mining Now. We are doing episodes from Indaba in South Africa. Our first guest is going to be Andrew Crose. He is the VP of Autonomy at Hexagon. We've had Hexagon on before, and we've had Rob Dahl on. Now we're going to be having Andrew on to sort of talk about different streams and answering some questions specific to autonomy in South Africa, as well as his area of focus. Andrew, it's great to have you on the show. Welcome.
Yeah, great to be here. Good to see you.
Yeah, it's. I'm doing this from the studio in Vancouver here, so I actually haven't been to Indaba personally. Could you give us a bit of what's the setup there as an event itself?
Yeah, I've been coming here for a number of years, and in fact, my very first time to Africa was to come to an Indaba.
Oh,
as I understand it, it started out as a investor show. The money from London coming down to talk with the mines of Africa, but it's evolved into a lot more than that. It's really kind of one of the main meeting places you see in the industry for the African continent.
As for a company like Hexagon, how long have you been with Hexagon?
About 6 years now.
Oh, okay. So have you been to this representing Hexagon before?
Yeah, just about every year they've held it for the last 6 years, and I've been coming for several years before that.
Has the messaging, and we'll get into some of the questions you'll be asked, has the messaging of Hexagon sort of evolved as the industry's evolved there from 3 years ago you go there till now?
Yes and no. The story of Hexagon is sort of, with our growth and acquisitions, we really weren't known here, say 4 or 5 years ago. But then with the projects we've been doing and some of the different customers we've been working with, I think, it's kind of changed the story, and we've had a great growth here the last 5 years, especially in Africa.
When you're going out to this event and talking to people, what do you think, if we were to pick 2 or 3 questions, what do you think, and we can spend a little bit of time on this, expanding on it as well, but what would be a few questions that you'll be fielding at the event?
Yeah, so obviously, my role of autonomy, there's always questions around how does, autonomy work in developing countries? How does autonomy work in Africa? That's always a very real question. We'll have some customers that are looking at, or some of the mines looking at doing small R&D projects, but then wondering, like, how does this become production grade, or how do we implement this into the operation? So those are some of the main questions we tend to hear from. And then obviously, as one of the premiers for, OEM agnostic or OEM independent autonomy, there's a lot of questions of how does this play, or how can we do what we do while not being an equipment manufacturer.
At OIM Consulting, they drive profitability by building your supervisory capability. They equip the people who carry your culture, engage your teams, and ensure that daily targets are achieved. If you want measurable operational results, visit oimconsulting.com. Analyze, improve, sustain. Okay, so let's give a special thank you to one of our longest sponsors of the show, Savannah Equipment. And I'm actually going to hand it over to Jared so that he can give you a little bit more info on Savannah Equipment.
Yeah, thank you. So people see them as sponsors, so they'll ask me, kind of who they are, what they are, and just trying to understand the scope of the company. So Savannah Equipment is a mining supply company, and they're delivering on the whole equipment supply chain. So everything from the ore processing to underground mining, open pit. They're in hard rock and placer operations. And what they're doing is they're sourcing equipment from all over the world and then delivering it all over the world. Now, they are a Canadian company, so they're based there, but, let's say, they're selling entire ore processing plants. So there might be a plant down in Latin America, and there's a new mine that needs that plant in Africa or somewhere in the US. So they're facilitating that entire transactions. But they're also delivering, an individual conveyor or a concentrator or a pump package or just an electrical package. So it really is the whole gambit of the mining equipment supply chain.
Oh, that's great then. Well, then you definitely have to check them out. If you're looking for mining equipment, visit them at savannahEquipment.com, where you will find more equipment every day.
When we were talking before we started the interview, you mentioned 2 terms, and Operation Intent Autonomy and OEM Independent Autonomy, which you just referenced earlier. So could you sort of unpack those two and what's the difference between the two?
Yeah, so OEM agnostic autonomy is sort of that challenge of we're not making the machine, but we're going in and we're putting the technology in so that we can automate that machine. So we can make it either driverless or add an assist technology to automate a portion of it, like the braking or the speed control.
Mm.
Yeah, so that's how we go about it. And we have a fairly deep stack of technology within Hexagon that we leverage. So we have things like steering actuators, braking actuators. We have by-wire capabilities for the electronic fly-by-wire. And then we bring that back to onboard autonomy, the logic, if you will. And that logic is what controls those braking and steering actuators, as well as the logic on where the truck should go and fleet management and what roads and how it should act on those roads, as well as what we're actually classically known for in the Southern Africa is our safety portfolio, our ability to do collision awareness and avoidance throughout the entire mine road network. So we can bring all that together to make a autonomous vehicle or an autonomous drill that doesn't rely on being the manufacturer of that drill or that truck, for example.
Well,
and that's sort of the OEM agnostic piece, right?
right. Okay. So to expand on that then, and that goes back to the questions you're talking about, essentially industry adoption.
Hmm.
So so at this event, if someone's coming to you and they're describing a setup that they have, you're not limited by certain OEMs of that. Is it pretty? Can you pretty much apply it to any operation that they have?
Yeah, so there's the equipment side, and that takes a understanding of the piece of equipment, the truck and the steering and that, and we tend to have to do a little bit of a research on that to make sure that it's applicable. But once that's overcome, then the next is the application itself. Whether it's a specific portion of the application, is it just a remote stripping operation, or is it the full deployment across the mine? And we've done everything from looking at the autonomous road train project, and like we're deploying in Australia, and through load and haul.
So what would be the main difference? Let's say a place like Australia. Of course, we do a lot of episodes. I think we did just 17 episodes in Australia. Obviously, lots in the U.S. and Canada. What would be the difference in process? I guess is what I'm trying to get to. And if you're looking at a developing market in South Africa versus in Australia, is it going to be at a different approach
Yep.
that you'll have to take?
Well, I mean, first, just the drivers are different. So if you look at Australia, and I just flew in from Perth yesterday, the drivers there, where you've got an average age of operators in the Pilbara in their mid 50s to early 60s, it's a challenge to even just find operators. Where Africa is a very young continent, it has a pretty young, very talented, very energetic population. And for that, the drivers can be more around safety or more around consistency of operation, as opposed to replacing an aging operator fleet. So completely different drivers, and
Oh,
that influences
interesting.
the way we go at things.
It's funny because when you said drivers, I thought you meant like industry drivers. You meant the actual people
The
driving the
value
vehicles.
drivers,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So okay, so you're saying then it would be more like a safety focus, maybe then more of the autonomy focus then of the actual truck itself.
Safety and consistency. So if we look at, say, our vehicle intervention semi-autonomous technology, we've deployed over 500 vehicles. Many of them, or most of them, actually still in Africa. And driving a truck is very long work, especially in hot temperatures and long shifts, especially overnight. It is prone to being very fatigue oriented, which we do have a fatigue technology, but it's also prone to incident and accident. So we developed a technology actually first in South Africa. It's actually why I moved here 5 years ago and lived here for many years, to actually intervene on the speed, intervene on the braking, take partial control of the vehicle in a semi-autonomous way to help prevent those accidents. Where if we look at another technology like our drill assist product, that is really about ensuring with a single button press that the drill levels and collars and drills accurately, much like cruise control in your car. So it's not replacing an operator per se, but is making them better at what they do.
The CIM 2023 Convention and Expo is coming to Montreal from April 30th to May 3rd. So join us in recognizing your peers at the annual CIM Awards Gala. This year is extra special because CIM is celebrating its 125th anniversary. There will be special programming and perks for exhibitors and attendees alike. Registration is now open and tickets sell out fast, so visit CIM.org to register now for short courses and explore sponsorship opportunities. Geograph is Australia's leading manufacturer of enhanced performance mining parts. Geograph designs and manufactures enhanced wear parts to suit major mining machinery from Caterpillar, Komatsu, Hitachi, Liebherr, and more. The Geograph Enhanced Performance range is designed to reduce downtime and operating costs for mine sites and off-site repairers by engineering wear parts to last longer. Geograph challenges you to expect more from yourself and your assets. Visit geograph.com.au for more information or click the link in the video description below. PowerZone carries a massive inventory of pumps, engines, generators, and compressors. However, they don't stop there. They combine imagination with world-class engineering. They detail the entire process to every customer. Their pump package testing facility ensures your equipment is landing on-site, ready to work. That is PowerZone. Start with inventory, develop with imagination, deliver with integrity, and it's all at powerzone.com. That is PowerZone.
Now, on the operation, again, I'm trying to like piece it together myself because we interview the experts. I don't always get to be the expert. So on
Sure.
the operation autonomy side, operation intent autonomy, I think is a term used. What is
Yeah.
that specific to?
Yeah, so I mean, and again, it does vary by market, but I mean, really what it is about putting something in that creates the value for the mine. So, especially when you're working in some of the more remote mines in Africa, or you're working in some of the more economically challenging mines, you want to put something in that has a real value proposition that is going to basically increase the productivity or decrease the cost of a mine. Where some of the other markets have the luxury of doing R&D projects or putting in a technology that is a proof of concept. When you do it here in Africa, you really need to make sure you're doing it to provide value.
And what is the? Sorry, I sort of missed the why it's specific to Africa that you can't that the R&D part is a little bit more challenging.
It's just about saying, we're going to fund, say, a multi-million-dollar proof of concept,
Right.
as opposed to buy a technology that we can implement and use it in the mine immediately.
Something that I really, I wish in some of the older episodes I had asked this question because I feel like it sort of missed out on some really good information for the audience. Can you walk us through the first, let's say at this event, you meet somebody that says, okay, we've got this operating mine. We're doing we have a drill plan over here. We've got some open pit operations over here. This is the setup. We'll meet next week and go through the process. After those initial meetings where they go, okay, there's value there. Let's begin the process. What is that first week of communication? What are the key things that you're trying to gather and walk them through, and common questions they'll have? What's sort of that whole process like in that first stage of communication?
It's strange because it's actually not about the technology. It's more about the operational readiness.
Right.
What is the current state of operations? How do they presently do things? What are the challenges they're facing in that? So, for example, a good chunk of Africa or even EMEA would be in very hot desert climates.
Mm-hmm.
So, looking at saying, how do they manage some of their manual processes when it's extremely hot? Do they limit themselves in mining just during, say, evening and night shifts? Or, for example, some of the operations would have manual spotters today. And this has been a big challenge in the industry for the last few years, but not necessarily having those spotters being highly productive in the heat of the day or even visible at night. So that manual process, can be augmented with a technology such as our New World Perception system that would actually monitor the edge of the berm autonomously and apply the speed and the brakes to prevent a truck from accidentally, say, rolling backwards over a void and getting into a major accident.
What would be an example then of okay, so let's say the trucks. I'm assuming you said you've done 500 vehicles
Yeah,
now.
over 500.
So I would assume that gets to be a pretty clean implementation there. What would be some of the harder implementations to that or some of the major challenges that are a little bit harder to solve for these customers?
Yeah, sometimes it's about chasing that corner case, that edge case.
Hmm.
So we've got over 4 million hours operating in our semi-autonomous vehicle intervention system. And it might be, though, that there's a corner case that creeps up in a million hours of operation. There's going to be an outlier. And then making sure that it's understood that technology is there to add to your safety profile or add to your operational readiness. And really ensuring that when a corner case comes in, that we're able to tackle that specific use case, put it on the technology roadmap, and solve new problems. Especially like this new world perception I mentioned earlier. This is state of the art, brand new to the world radars that are being launched that have a very high degree of accuracy that
Hmm.
feeds into our perception stack. Well, those radars were only available now. So, there were some of these incidences where the technology just wasn't there yet to solve that case. And we're very excited and to be bringing this to market because now we can solve this problem. Now we can add to that safety layer that we couldn't previously.
So for something like world perception, then does that integrate into existing? Like, can you update sensors in existing fleets, or
Mhm.
is that like a whole new system that needs to get put in?
Yeah, so it's an upgrade to a system that we had on the market for a number of years and allows us to have much greater accuracy. So whether autonomous or manned, we can now see, up to 150, even 180 meters ahead.
Hmm.
We can see voids, we can see berms, we can see a greater view of the objects around a truck. I mean, as you can imagine, the very large trucks have relatively poor visibility.
Hmm.
And we're taking this technology into our manned world so that we can give operators awareness of what's around them. But we're also taking this into our semi-autonomous and autonomous stacks so that we can, for example, on the road trains, drive it at higher speeds and not have as many worries about the braking distances, or in the large haul trucks to enable us to do void detection, as I mentioned earlier, and not back over a high wall.
Is it just a kind of a random thought that came to my mind when you're because from other conversations with Hexagon that just that continual development, and I wanted to actually ask you if there's any sort of new products that are kind of coming on the market you wanted to highlight as well. But with that, when you let's say 3 years ago you've put this technology into someone's fleet, now you have to go back to them and upgrade. Is that an easier process, or if it's working well for the last 3 years, is it sometimes a challenge to sort of get them to go to another level and another level?
Yeah, it depends on what we're doing. So, I mean, generally speaking, we try and make sure everything's interoperable. So, for example, we can upgrade a mine today into an autonomous fleet where the manned fleet or the non-autonomous fleet can have our safety products that have been in place for 3 to 5 years.
Mm.
It may mean that maybe on the equipment we're making autonomous, we have to upgrade a few sensors, or we might have to update some software, or add a physical control. But it's about adding, not ripping and replacing, generally speaking, for existing customers. And that's the nice thing too. It even works for customers who want to get into this technology. They can have an easier start point by just, say, putting in a basic manned collision avoidance system.
Is there a sort of a sweet spot in size, or can fairly small? I'm specifically asking this because we've had some juniors coming on the show, and they're getting closer and closer to production now. But they're going to be sort of these smaller scales mines that you're seeing popping up, like in Canada specifically, they're starting to get a little more support than they would have because of obviously the demand. And so I'm just wondering, where does Hexagon start at what scale do they start to be able to sort of step in?
Yeah. So even last week, I was talking to an operation that just had literally 2 trucks.
Oh, okay.
And it was convenient in the fact that they had a truck that we'd already developed the by-wire system for.
Mm,
So that was sort of a project we could easily take on because we had that particular make and model already accomplished. As long as it's a make and model that we've got kind of on the shelf,
mm,
then it's much easier.
I see.
And then, yeah, and given the size of Hexagon, the rest gets a little bit easier. We can do things like remote dispatching, remote autonomy. Sometimes it's a bit of a challenge for the mines to scale up the staff to do the work. But we can bring that in-house and even do it remotely from our operations in the regional offices around the world.
Right. What are there some products you're going to be highlighting here that you're sort of rolling out or fairly new to the market?
Yeah, so this year is going to be a big year for autonomy at Hexagon. Last year we completed the 500th vehicle intervention system. Now, the legislation in South Africa was enabled earlier this year, so we're expecting a lot of customers to wanting to be rolling that out to comply with the law. We are working on a world perception system I mentioned earlier. That's going to feed into our next generation autonomous system because that sensor will then allow us to do many more features from that hardware. So that's going to be huge for us. I just came last week from our autonomous road train project. That's an industry first. Nobody's been able to really automate these road trains previously. The last thing that we're bringing to the market this year that's very exciting for us is a drill assist product. It's actually a system that works on existing drills and can take over the operation in the field of the leveling, the collaring, and the pull down pressure. And that's going to be a big launch for us and the industry. You'd see this come in a system that uses an AI algorithm to make the drilling process more consistent, more regular, and augments a lot of the machine guidance that Hexagon's been known for years, which is sort of like a speedometer on a car. It tells you what speed and how you should be operating. With drill assist, it's kind of like cruise control for drilling. It'll control what the
Wow.
drill actually does.
So, and then with the AI component, is that AI learning as is it AI geared towards the operation of the drill, or is there part of it geared towards the actual operator itself? That might be not, drillers might be saying, well, that's a weird question, but
Yeah, no, actually, it's learning from all the sensors on the drill in a way that optimizes the drilling. So for the driller going forward, once he gets over the drill hole, he just needs to press a button
wow.
and it takes it over from there.
So, uh, when it gets to that point, before I let you go, I wanted to ask about the fatigue one, and I was trying to think of how that. I'm assuming it's not like a little squirt gun or something while someone's driving.
Yeah,
How,
yeah, understood.
what is that setup?
Yeah, the fatigue system is a very interesting one. So it uses a algorithm, actually another AI algorithm that monitors the face and looks for elements of fatigue, particularly in the eyes. And
Oh,
it's an interesting, very complex algorithm because it can actually be used when you're wearing masks, even can be used in almost day or night. And this system augments our safety portfolio. It's been very popular in the African continent over
mm,
the last 5 years. I think we're at 30 plus mines and growing very fast. And this, especially overnight shifts, long shifts, fly in, fly out shifts, operating in high sun or overnight. And yeah, so it senses the fatigue. It gives a feedback to the operator in the cab that
mm.
he might be in a fatigue state, either alarms and or vibrations in the seat, but also sends data back to a central location so that they can call out and intervene, or even send messages to a shift supervisor that he may be in a fatigued and unsafe state.
I have to. I'll try to make this my last before I let you go. But I have to wonder when you're going onto a site. It seems like one of these setups where you'd come in and they only know what they know. So they're saying, well, we
Hmm.
have this problem to fix. But then by the time you walk out, there's probably 10. Is that sort of the setup that happens quite often with these clients? Just not even knowing like that fatigue thing. Now that you say it, it would be so obvious if you're an operator that you would need that, but it would be an easy thing to miss as well.
Yeah, and I love going to site. It's kind of unfortunate I can't get to site as much as I used to, especially pre-COVID.
Right.
But I love going to site because you can spend a week on site and you can start learning about, oh, they've had an accident, and then you start saying, well, tell me a little bit about the accident. How did it happen? What were some of the controls? And we can look at everything from even our design tools on how the mine was designed, through to monitoring the fatigue, setting up the collision avoidance. We've got such a deep stack of technology at Hexagon, and this is leveraged into the autonomy space as well. And many times it's just adding few extra sensors. So it can be the same core computing box. It can be the same antenna. And then we add some software, we enable some functionality, and suddenly you have a mine that has gone from a very low technology standpoint to one that has, full fleet management, semi-autonomous reverse assist, collision avoidance, traffic management, fatigue monitoring, all these technology stacks, while at the same time it's running on that very small footprint of technology in the cab. It's on one screen, it's on one computer, it's transmitting over one network. It has maybe, so this technology stack is very nice in the fact that we can go and deploy it. And I think you see a lot of parallels in what we're doing now to, say, business technology of 10 to 15 years ago. If you were thinking about your ERP, you would think, well, I'll just upgrade my ERP. But now if you were to do it today in a modern world, you'd say, well, I'm going to upgrade my ERP, my time tracking, my inventory management, my billing and invoice processes. Now in mining technology, instead of saying, well, I'm going to go out and buy a fleet management system, or I'm going to buy a fatigue monitoring system, with companies like Hexagon having put all this technology into one computing platform, into one sensor stack, you wouldn't say, I just want a fatigue system, or I just want a collision avoidance system, or a fleet management system. You would say, I'd like to go out and look at all the technology I'm putting on the equipment, all the technology I'm putting on the trucks, putting on the shovels, do it as one project instead of 6 or 8 projects. And, either do a full deployment right then of all that technology stack. And for us, we can do fleet management, collision avoidance, fatigue monitoring, asset health, telematic live monitoring, all the way through semi-autonomous and autonomous applications. And by doing this, we reduce the effort to do 8 projects over a year, or we can do one project, put the sensors and technology in, bring the truck down once for that installation, and then just deploy it as software layers and add on sensors much quicker later.
Is adoption sometimes, again, I'm asking this question with the context of I've got to interview about Hexagon a couple times, so I've sort of learned it. Is the adoption sometimes easier than maybe people think it is?
Operators are drivers, and if I use an analogy, because I end up in a lot of rental cars, if I'm in a German-made rental car versus a Japanese-made rental car, maybe for the first day, I go to turn on the turn signal and I turn on the windshield wipers instead.
Yeah.
But if you're used to this, operation, if the technology's made with a good user experience, a good interface, if it's made with the operator in mind, then adoption tends to be pretty quick. And especially when it's safety, then as long as they understand that that's there to make them safer, to make sure they can get home every night, then it tends to be very easy.
Yeah. It's very exciting. It's always exciting to talk to Hexagon because it's one of those companies that it's always a bit of a different conversation every time because there's so many channels to explore. So Andrew, I hope it's not our last time chatting. We just met right when we came online here, so I'd like to do it again. I know you've got a lot of knowledge within the industry, so hopefully we can do it again and can explore some of those.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Looking forward to it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody, for watching. That'll be our first episode. Gowdy hates when I do that because they don't necessarily get released in the order we film them. But that's our first episode that we filmed from Indaba. There's going to be more coming to you. Thank you to Hexagon and the team for helping us put it all together. And we will see you on the next episode of Mining Now.